Joe Grizzly, bitch.
What up, Militia? I mean Joe Grizzly, and when I'm not trying to survive a weird satanic cult that terrorizes the infected-ridden wastelands of the UK, or following a sympathetic doctor who is trying to see the humanity within the infected themselves, I'm at the Grizzly Cave, watching a review of movies while, of course, crushing beers. And I'm about to bring y'all my review of the sequel to last year's polarizing and long-awaited sequel in the 28 franchise 28 years later. I had mixed feelings on this one, but overall gave it a positive review, and after a rewatch, I ended up labeling it one of my biggest disappointments of last year. So does the sequel 28 years later, Bone Temple, deliver what the last one could not? Let's find out. This is Grizzly Grade Reviews. So last year's 28 years later left off with our main character Spike being captured by the Jimmies, a satanic cult led by the psychopathic Sir Jimmy Crystal, played by the great Jack O'Connell. And needless to say, their introduction was comical for all the wrong reasons and super confusing, drawing parallels to Power Rangers of all things. And with that and a long list of other problems I had with the other film, and Nia DaCosta placed in the director's chair for Bone Temple, as well as a January release date, I had little faith in this sequel. In fact, I would have bet money that this one wasn't even going to be good as 28 years later. And I have to admit that I was 100% wrong. 28 years later, Bone Temple is great. So starting out, there are two different stories with two different perspectives on humanity going on at the same time in this movie. And I think that they are both very, very well crafted. The first story that goes on involves Spike, and it picks up directly where the last one left off, where he is taken by the Jimmy's gang. He is given an opportunity to join the gang, but the only way that he can join is by killing one of the Jimmys. And he obviously does so, and then he is integrated into this gang almost immediately. There isn't really any vetting other than that. It's just he killed one of the members in self-defense, and they threw him in a jumpsuit and gave him a blonde wig, and bam, he's one of them now. And right off the bat, I just want to say that the way that the Jimmys are depicted in this movie is starkly different tonally and way more serious and dark than they were at the end of 28 years later. When they got introduced at the end, just like I said in the introduction, it was very, very, very comical. In fact, it was just flat out silly. They were literally flipping around in the air like Power Rangers, and it just didn't work for me at all. In fact, it put a big, huge negative exclamation point on my view of that movie, because I already had certain issues with that movie, and that just left me honestly pretty damn bewildered by the end of that experience. And I'll go into some of that other stuff later, but just know that now they are not depicted as these goofy ass people that are just out here in this UK wasteland just cutting flips and killing infected, all like they're in a fucking circus or anything. They are very, very, very terrifying, and that is something that is not an understatement. These people, if you ran into these people out in an already harsh world, they are 100% the biggest threat that you're going to run into. And make no mistake about it, these guys are the most dangerous things that you're going to run into out here. Even hordes of the infected would be something that I would rather run into than to run into this group of sadistic and, quite frankly, just flat out evil murderers. And you don't really know if any of these people were like this before. It is kind of hinted at that the leader of the group, Sir Jimmy Crystal, played by Jack O'Connell, you think that he has found these people and molded them in the way that he wants them to be, because Jack barely remembers the world before the pandemic. He was a kid when this happened. In fact, you see him at the beginning of 28 years later, where in 2002, the town gets overrun when infected, and you see him and a group of other kids in a room watching Teletubbies. Now, all the members of the Jimmys, they do not seem to be around his age. All of them seem to be teenagers or maybe even early 20s, but no older than that. And Jimmy is definitely more closer to a middle-aged man than they are. So he is like the one that is definitely influencing them and controlling them. And he tells them that the world is supposed to be like this, and this is how it was before the pandemic. And we are going to take the opportunity that the pandemic has given us and shape this world into the place that we want it to be, and in an image that he wants it to be. I think what makes them so unsettling and horrifying to me is that when they come in and they interact with other people, they aren't like speaking any type of logic. They're not carrying on regular conversations. They're not trying to woo their way into getting in these people's graces only to turn around and murder them. They come in and you automatically know that they are dangerous. And it's because they talk like they're mindless savages. They're not out here acting like cavemen or anything like that, but they all act like they are all drugged out. They all act like they're tweaking and that they are just not making any sense in anything they do. And Sir Jimmy Crystal, he is clearly their leader from the get-go when you see them, if you're meeting these people for the first time. And all he does is talks about stuff that nobody would remember post-pandemic, or pre-pandemic rather. Like, he rambles on about the Teletubbies, because apparently the Teletubbies was a big thing for him when he was a kid. And people are just looking at them like they don't know what the hell the Teletubbies are, but he seems to think that they should know who that is. And he gets upset if people can't relate and don't understand what he's talking about. And he's just off the rails and absolutely fucking crazy. And the acts of violence that they commit, particularly in this one scene that takes place in a barn, is very reminiscent of early 2000s torture porn. And I don't know that if it's something that they were giving callbacks to, because for people that don't know, the early 2000s in horror was very, very mean-spirited. There wasn't a whole lot of fun going on in horror during the early 2000s on any kind of horror spectrum, really. There was some movies here and there, but for the most part, it was very mean-spirited, and it was going to push the limits of violence. And the type of violence that you see from the Jimmys here is very close to that, to where it is, the gore might not be the goriest thing you've ever seen. Like, it's not on the level of something like a Terrifier or anything like that, but it's something that is too close to home. It's very realistic violence, and it's sadistic, and it's very, very unsettling to watch. And this story is pretty much saying that sometimes when disasters hit, or if something like this ever were to happen, there is going to be people who give in to their darkest desires. They are going to do the things that they've always wanted to do and the way that they want to do them. And if that is something like someone who is a murderer or someone who just has these homicidal tendencies, they're going to find any way they can to commit these acts, and they are going to manipulate anybody they have to manipulate to do this. And Sir Jimmy Crystal is a true villain, and the way that he manipulates and controls people through fear and just spreads that fear everywhere so everybody knows what he's all about is how a lot of humanity would act in a situation like this, in a post-apocalyptic era like this. And then we're given the second story that's going on at the same time, which revolves around Dr. Ian Kelson. And we met Ian Kelson in the last film, and he is depicted before our character Spike meets him as this man who is just out on the mainland that is just burning bodies and making shrines of skeletons. He's depicted as being very monstrous, very eccentric, and someone that everyone is afraid of, and everybody is told never to go near him. And Spike finds out that he is this very kind, sympathetic, and caring person who is trying his best to build the Bone Temple in order to preserve the memory of these people who were forgotten in the wave of this horrible pandemic. The great Ralph Fiennes comes back and reprises his role as Kelson, and he is the best part of this movie. He is pretty much the main character, and his version of the story, in my opinion, is the best part of this movie. And some people might not agree with me on that, But I feel like that his character is so intriguing and so hopeful. He is someone that you hope that if this ever happened, that there are more people like him instead of the Jimmy's gang. You have this really cool two sides of the same coin here going on, where you have the absolute depraved, monstrous, and horrible with the Jimmy's gang, and you have the caring nature of Kelson, who is just trying to build this tribute to the people who are forgotten by this horrible incident. And he's trying his best to maintain the good in humanity. He represents everything that was good about humanity pre-pandemic. He is not only sympathetic to humans that he meets on the mainland, but he's also sympathetic to the infected. And he doesn't look at them as these mindless monsters that are just killing machines that if you run into them is certain death. He looks at them as their patients and they're sick. Him being a former medical doctor, he doesn't discard their humanity, and he doesn't give up on their humanity either. There is an alpha that we are introduced to in the last movie that he has named Samson, and his relationship with Samson is so extraordinary. Samson is literally the scariest infected on that damn island. He is massive. I want to say that he has got to be at least 6'5", maybe even closer to 7 foot tall. He is just this massive, hulking monster. That he's dangerous. He's probably the most dangerous thing on that island. And then you have him coming across Kelson. And Kelson doesn't run from him. Kelson holds his ground. And Kelson ends up hitting him with one of his tranquilizer darts. He has like a blowgun, and that was also something that was introduced in the last film. And when he hits Samson with this blow dart, Samson becomes calm, docile, to the point that Kelson can go up and actually touch him and move him to certain areas if he wants to, keeping him from attacking him by essentially sedating him. And throughout this movie, his interaction with Samson and how he just treats him like a normal human, and yet at the same time he is studying him the entire time. He's trying so desperately to reach into that psyche of Samson and pull that humanity back to the surface, because Kelson knows that it's a virus that has taken over the body. It's not some mystical voodoo, some chemical, nothing. These aren't the Walking Dead that are resurrected. This is a virus that has polluted the mind of the infected. And him recognizing that and kind of going on this journey to where he's saying that these people might be able to be cured is something that injects hope into this hopeless world that we have been thrown into in these movies. And eventually these two stories come together when these two groups collide. And it's this very interesting contrast of the, again, darkest side of humanity and the glimmer of hope left in humanity coming to terms with each other. And it was just something that I thought was very well crafted and something that kept me interested the entire time. And that was something that the last film lacked. The last film felt like it was chopped up and put all over the place. Like there was just certain things. The story was just so spotty and so up and down and here and there that I felt like it didn't have any direction. There was no like really clear vision. And in this one, it is much more focused, and it's definitely put into a position to where you are locked in watching everything unfold. And I didn't have that with the last film. So it was really refreshing to see this one actually focus on two things and keep those two things locked in, and then have both of them converge at a certain point in the movie. This part, I debated on putting it in the mixed, but I decided on putting it in the positives, because I do think it's a positive, because I had very little faith in Nia DaCosta's ability to direct this movie and make this movie good. But I have to say that I've got to give credit where credit's due. She not only did well with this, she did great. The way that she balanced these two storylines and had them come together, she done a masterful job of that. I think that ideas that absolutely do not work on paper, she somehow was able to make them work on this movie. There is a scene at the end of this movie that I absolutely loved. Everybody in the audience loved it. It was awesome, and on paper, it looks fucking ridiculous. It does not work on paper. It is something that is flat out should be goofy on screen, particularly in a movie that is so dark and so serious, and somehow she makes it work, and it is fucking awesome. So I do want to give her credit for that, because for the longest time, I've kind of felt like I'm out on an island on this subject, that Nia DaCosta isn't a good director. And it's because I have so many colleagues and I have so many people on this platform that I trust their opinion and I value their opinion on film, that have been pushing this. Nia DaCosta is a generational talent. She has so much immense skill as a filmmaker, and I just haven't seen it yet. I've watched every movie besides her first film, and we all know how bad The Marvels was. I give her a pass on that because Disney likes to do a lot of creative control on that. But nevertheless, it's not even competently directed. So I don't think that we can really judge her on that, but she has that blemish. And then there's the Candyman reboot, that I am in the camp that Jordan Peele ghost directed that movie. Because not only was he a producer on the movie and his production company put the movie out, I just see his style overwhelmingly on that movie. And it doesn't feel like anybody else's movie but Jordan Peele's. So I do not think that Nia DaCosta directed that movie, and I will probably think that till I go to my grave, because there's nothing there that screams her style. She doesn't have a style. And I didn't really care for the way that the direction that movie went in towards the end. I felt like it was kind of pretentious, and it really didn't fall in line with the Candyman lore, in my opinion. And I have no evidence to back this up, guys. This is just how it looks to me. That is why I couldn't understand the hype behind Nia DaCosta. I'm still not completely sold on her as this new visionary in horror or filmmaking, but I will say that now she has my attention, because before I felt like the praise was not earned, nor was it even justified. I think that this is easily her best film, and I feel like that she did a great job of crafting these two stories and making them come together at the end to work, and making stuff that doesn't work on paper work on the screen, because a lot of this shit is ridiculous, and she somehow just makes it work on the screen. And for that, I believe that she deserves all the respect due. To me, she also gets credit for this, but this soundtrack's great, guys. There are a lot of really good songs in this movie, and their use is to perfection. You got all varieties of genres of music used here, and when they are used in the way that Nia DaCosta uses them, they are these fantastic needle drops that really catch the attention of the scene and make a scene so impactful and so rememberable. I think that their use of music in this movie was absolutely incredible, and I really, really enjoyed that. Particularly the scene, there's a scene at the end that uses an Iron Maiden song, and man, let me tell you, it's badass. If you're a metalhead, you're really going to like it. And finally, I like the direction that the movie took at the end, particularly the last 5 to 10 minutes of this movie. The direction that it goes in gives me hope that the third film is going to be good too, even though I think it's going to be a completely different movie than these two, just like this movie was completely different than 28 Years Later. So I'm really anxious to see how this trilogy is going to conclude, and I'm very anxious to see if it's going to change my opinion on either this one or 28 Years Later, because right now 28 Years Later for me is sitting at the bottom of the franchise as the worst film in the franchise, but this movie is somewhere between second and third place. I really enjoyed the direction that they took this movie, and now that we have the direction that they gave us at the end of the film, I'm really excited to see how they're going to conclude this. Moving on to the mix aspect, and this is something that I really have been struggling with. I actually took time to sleep on this movie because there's something that just felt off about this movie that I could not get my head around. I walked away really enjoying it and thought it was good, even great, but there was something lingering that I could not put my finger on. And I think what is just off for me is the injection of a lot of stuff from British culture into both of these movies is something that it just doesn't hit for me. And it's not that I'm against any other culture getting put into a movie, particularly if the writer or directors are from the UK. I just don't think that anyone outside of the UK can really relate to some of the themes and some of the stuff that is being explored in the backdrop of this movie, because none of us outside the UK grew up in the UK and we don't understand any of those references. You literally have to Google a lot of the stuff that goes on in the backdrop of this movie to understand how certain characters work and how certain symbolism works and stuff. And they really toned it down in this movie. But the one thing that I'm still not following up with, and I'm still not like sold on, is what is the purpose of using the figure of Jimmy Savile in this movie? I understand that he was this big like TV star in the UK for years and decades, and that he had his hands in just about everything. And then it comes out after his death that he was one of the most prolific pedophiles in UK history, if not the most prolific pedophile. And I kind of understand why we attach that to the Jimmy's gang. But all in all, I don't feel its relevance. I understand that he's this diabolical monster, and that Sir Jimmy Crystal is kind of the guy who is influencing all these younger people to follow him and all that. But I don't see it being so relevant that it matters to the story, if that makes any sense. And I could be completely off base with that, but it's something that I don't think that referencing Teletubbies and stuff like that is actually scary. It just or even menacing whatsoever. It just makes those characters just seem unhinged, and not really unhinged in the way of got you on the edge of your seat because he's talking about Tinky Winky and no one understands who Tinky Winky is. So it's really hard for me to explain that, but all the British references and stuff just don't work for me. They're lost on me, and it's something that I cannot hold against the film because it is a product of the UK, so I cannot hold their own culture against them, if that makes any sense. But it's something that it's definitely off-putting for me because I can't relate to it. Moving on to the negatives, the character of Spike is 100% a secondary character in this movie. And as much as Alfie Williams does a really good job of bringing that character to life, he gets zero character development. He is thrown into this really, really dangerous situation, and you are very scared for him. You do not want him to be killed by the Jimmies, and you don't want him to join them fully either. You just want him to survive. But that's all that he really does in this movie, is that he's a scared little boy, and all he's doing is trying to survive this situation and avoid becoming the monsters that his captors are. And he really doesn't move forward whatsoever in his character development. And that was something that was kind of disappointing to me. Ralph Fiennes and Jack O'Connell are definitely the main characters of this movie. And I just wish that we could have got just a little bit more focus on the character of Spike, because he is, after all, our main character of this trilogy, at least as of right now. And along with all that, he has a lot of plot armor, and I mean a lot, because Sir Jimmy Crystal is this villain who he will kill his own men if they defy him. And he is very merciless when it comes to that. And Spike defies him on multiple times, like just by not doing what he tells him to do, or flat out lying about killing someone that he told him to kill and letting them get away. it just doesn't make any sense that he wouldn't suffer some kind of wrath from Sir Jimmy Crystal. So I found that plot armor to be kind of very obvious and kind of lazy, to be honest with you. And this is something that is definitely could change after this trilogy is finished, but there are certain story elements that were set up in the last movie that are completely non-existent in this movie. One of them is the infected baby that Spike took back to his village for them to raise. Like we hear nothing about them. And the other is his father's journey to find him and save him. As relentless as he was at the end of that movie on trying to find Spike and trying to find his wife, he just never makes an appearance. And he's supposed to be this really good tracker and one of the best in his town. And you're going to try to convince me that in this very isolated area that this movie is taking place at, that he hasn't found them yet. Like he hasn't in any way, shape, or form made any kind of contact with them throughout this whole ordeal. And this movie takes place over a few days. So certainly at some point he should be finding his son and interacting with these other characters, or something should be happening here. And it could be very hand wavy and just saying that Aaron Taylor Johnson just didn't return for that movie. But it doesn't make sense narrative wise, and for that character who was so committed to keeping his kids safe. And not only that, him and his kid and his wife both going to the mainland, the most dangerous place around them, and him just sitting back on the island chilling and not going after him. So I found that to be kind of a weird choice, that he doesn't even get mentioned or nothing, or even shown to be going after and trying to help this to save Spike at all. But overall, guys, I really liked it. I thought it was pretty good. It was something that I had to think on a little bit because there were certain things I had to reconcile, but it's definitely a big step up from the last movie. And I found myself completely engaged the entire time. I found that Ralph Fiennes and Jack O'Connell's performances were fantastic. Probably going to be some of the best of the year. I felt like that the way that they handled the harshness of the world, the way that Nia DaCosta balanced the two stories and made stuff that doesn't work on paper work on screen, and the way that the music was used in the soundtrack for these great moments in the movie. This movie did everything that I wanted that last movie to do. And I feel like that this world that we're in is something that is very interesting and something that I want to continue seeing. So I'm pretty excited to see what happens next. So with all that being said, 28 years later, The Bone Temple gets a 4 out of 5 and is Grizzly grade guaranteed. Go out and see it. If you didn't like 28 Years Later, you will more than likely love this movie because it definitely was the better movie for me. Well, that does it for this video. Thank you all so much for your continued support and patience. Without y'all, this channel isn't possible. And if you like this video, like it. And if you like it enough, please head over to the channel, hit the subscribe and bell button so you never miss a video. Also, please follow me on all social media platforms so you can get channel updates, movie news, and all forms of badassery. If you click right here, you'll get my review of Primate. If you click right there, you will get all of my Grizzly grade reviews on this playlist. So make sure you do that, and remember, I'm Joe Grizzly, bitch.